Crimes of the Future, spoilers. I would prefer you watch the film first. My writing will make more sense if you have, but I won't stop you from hearing this if you like. Well, I literally can't, so why bother? Whatever, I just wanted to be courteous, for a change, and conjure an illusion of politeness before we get into the body of this Cronenberg specimen. It is possible that Cronenberg's acclaim as a kind of cinematic, abrasive novelist has injured his gifts as a writer. Whilst his skills as an actual filmmaker, a realizer of visual ideas, is incomparable, 2022's Crimes of the Future suffers from the same hollow jump-starting of revelatory profundity which Existence invoked. Videodrome was a genuinely striking, relevant, and original idea. By 1999, it and Cronenberg at large were being more lauded as genius modern masterworks than trash, subversive gore peddling. For Existence, Cronenberg thought, video games might affect people's perceptions of reality, and that may as well have been all he thought. For 2022's Crimes of the Future, Cronenberg thought, cosmetic surgery might alter the traditional self-assessment of human beings individually, and how we ontologically perceive our species at large. Beyond acting as the field for an admittedly gripping and endlessly fascinating, narratively, thriller exercise, Cronenberg adopts relevant subject matter to ensure his continued critical acclaim, without having anything interesting to communicate about it, as he had for Videodrome, Shivers, The Brood, even The Fly. Okay, so what? Is all I can feel at the end of Crimes of the Future, when considering how I'm supposed to see our world any differently. Existence, and this film too, of course, are so engrossing and enjoyable as filmic experiences that we hardly care. Maybe we shouldn't. But sincerely, do any of you feel like you learned something or felt something new about the world after viewing Existence? Did it really change how you perceive video games at the time? Or maybe it inspired you to retroactively consider it ahead of its time on the VR question, but wasn't World on a Wire, Ghost in the Shell, thereby Matrix, and even Videodrome itself doing this also, and with greater assertiveness and clarity and purpose to it beyond, I suppose this is what is expected of me, Cronenberg, now. It must be said, we need to stop pretending that Kristen Stewart is a good enough actress to be in these acclaimed directors' films. The edginess factor, actually, the girl from Twilight is a good actress, has worn off. I'll admit that Robert Pattinson has proven himself a rather good actor, including in Cronenberg's own films, 2012's Cosmopolis, and in films by Denis Eggers and Nolan, plus he makes a good Batman, actually. I have no beef with a Twilight actor potentially delivering good performances, and Kristen Stewart is decent and watchable in particular films by the likes of Kelly Reichardt or Olivia Assayas, for one can imagine the roles could be performed better by superior actresses, honestly. Even in certain women from Reichardt, she's overshadowed by Laura Dern, Michelle Williams, and Lily Gladstone, immensely superior performers, in my view. There are so many extraordinary, talented young actresses who could pull off Stewart's parts as well, if not better, but would never be cast because they aren't considered pretty like Stewart is. Yes, Stewart is very pretty, certainly. But I wish at times that, especially in certain films, Stewart's part was played by a woman who looked more like a regular person you would meet and not a Hollywood actress or fashion model. I don't think Stewart's reasonable talent justifies her presence in most of her roles of the world's greatest film directors. I have refrained from watching Spencer for this reason. There are literally millions of superior British actresses who could and would have performed that role better, and we all know that if we aren't taken with vapid gross celebrity worship. Plus, I don't know, Diana films seem kind of bleh to me. I loved Jackie a lot from Lorraine, so that's why I'll still watch Spencer at some stage. I want to watch Eubank's horror film Underwater, but not because she is in it. In a horror context, she'll probably be better or more likable as a novelty factor. We'll see how that goes someday. Like watching Leonardo DiCaprio, one is only ever watching Leonardo DiCaprio, who is surrounded by distractingly superior actors in Scorsese's The Departed, earned an Oscar for doing the only thing he can do great, and what was plausibly his best performance in The Revenant. Keep celebrities out of auteur films. The edginess factor of, the superficial is actually of substance and not some vapid popularity contest, has long worn off. Many of you are too old to realize, or too young, to gauge that celebrities are generally narcissists and not worth their supposed status, luxury, or influence over our impressionable societies, and certainly not their overt superiority complexes. I get that she's famous and you want to be her friend or whatever, but she never plays anyone except Kristen Stewart's ego in her films. Don't pretend otherwise. Thanks. Cronenberg's first film not shot by Peter Suschitzky in some time, one Douglas Koch takes over the role of cinematographer and does an outstanding job. Cronenberg collaborated with Koch again on 2024's The Shrouds, which sounds totally compelling, and which I really cannot wait to see. That sounds like a premise of merit. Just the synopsis is compelling in a way that Cronenberg's feces in at least Existence or Crimes of the Future 22 were not, if we can even call them fetuses. I feel the same way about Crimes of the Future 22 as I did about Existence. Go watch my video upon that for elaboration, though I can sum it up by saying that Cronenberg's films used to offer visceral, forward-thinking, visual demonstrations that seemed inevitably thematically adventurous and revolutionary as a result, though sadly one does not necessarily lead to the other. Existence still reeks of, maybe I can do Videodrome but with video games, and Crimes of the Future feels like, hey, surgery and self-enhancement are all the rage, kind of. Betcha the critics would like a Cronenberg film about that. As an admirer of Cronenberg, as a fellow filmmaker who will never probably be as financed as Cronenberg, I will always admire what he accomplished here cinematographically, but if you just read this as a screenplay without seeing the film, I guarantee you would consider it lacking. This is not the case for Videodrome, or The Fly, Dead Ringers, The Brood, maybe even not for the likes of Scanners, Shivers, Cosmopolis, or Spider. But Cronenberg, based on the absurdly high, standard he set early on, and he isn't often acknowledged as a writer-director enough, let alone an utterly genius one of the best who ever did it, has gotten lazy on the odd recent occasion. As disappointing as Maps to the Stars was, it might still be better than 2011's A Dangerous Method, whose employment of Keira Knightley proves that you can do far, far worse than Stewart, and even more so that worship of celebrities, attractive actresses, and the desire to cast entertainers considered superficial and prove their artistic genius is vapid shock tactics, bet you didn't think garbage, and it ought to be left to the fashion world to not so subtly push a genetic hierarchy of attractive versus unattractive people, not the domain of the supposedly empowering, culturally progressive, so it would claim, world of the qualitative arts. I've known too many people to feel paralyzingly insecure as a result of society's elevation of the traditionally attractive, mainly applying to women, though men are to blame for treating many women like shit based upon what they look like, though the same applies to the women who do this to men on a similar or perhaps even greater scale. I will no longer tolerate elevation of physical features as worthy of superior treatment. It is possible that the concept of the sex symbol is dated and worth removing from our cultural norms. It is antithetical to the current lip service made to feminism and encourages certain men to be bullies in order to match a garish, fictionalized standard that a mass-marketing boardroom has unethically decided to exploit about humanity's primordial evolutionary pitfalls and inducements for irrational decision-making, psychologically manipulating prospective consumers, as Bernays so desired to unleash on a societal scale. At least it isn't Maps to the Stars, or Dangerous Method, but, Maps to the Stars, that would be hard work steeping that low, that easy, that ordinary and vapid. Ooh, celebrities in Hollywood, ooh, whilst inviting Hollywood actors to show off to the industry itself. Yeah, Hollywood and celebrity culture really felt the bite of Maps to the Stars. You fame-thirsty, detached elitists. That's like rich people joking about being self-aware of their materialism and greed or vices, so that means we don't have to acknowledge their apparent superiority complexes, an uncharitable, unutilitarian approach to the distribution of goods and resources around both the developed and underdeveloped world. That's why they peddled that social justice dreck so much, so that the richer don't have to acknowledge the real issue of hoarding of money for luxury, so that they don't have to address the reality of their greed, while still feeling morally superior to their wealthy or wealthier peers. This script is just bourgeois twiddle, but cinematographically, Cronenberg might be the finest filmmaker of his generation, and if the greatest acts of film direction are those that elevate otherwise banal or unimpressive scripts, Hitchcock for Vertigo, Huston for several films, Treborrow on quite a few films, or even a few De Palmas, possibly a Visconti or two, Powell, Offals, some of Fritz Lang also, then Cronenberg is still one of the very best, very finest directors in the world, and who ever lived at all. One of the most complimentary and also damning things I could say about Crimes of the Future is that it never lives up to one of the most confronting cold opening scenes of all time. Pure terrifying, affecting, emotional cinema, doing what other mediums can't do. Theatre has no philosophy of editing, obviously. Literature is too proud of itself, too verbose or subversively blunt. Too much ego in both variants. Cronenberg is a cinematic genius. To this day, even if his writing has faltered to some generally noticeable extent, at least where the more ardent fans and admirers are concerned, and I do admire him almost more than any other artist, adapting Burroughs and Ballard the way he did. Neither of these things, could not have been remotely anticipated from anyone, any filmmaker, not even from a Kubrick, potentially. In any case, I'll endorse it all the same, but I'm aware of its limitations as a piece of narrative media, but not as an exercise in visual art. Not at all. This is Cronenberg we're discussing here, so